We've essentially got all the server components. We've got our server library built, we've got a desktop application. Now that desktop application is using file I/O objects, not Symphony Harmony. So now that desktop application is redundant. We can't use that because we've put all our data up on the cloud server. So we would have to change that desktop to use Harmony to talk to the cloud server. Because you can't use XF Server or XF Server Plus across the internet. It's a no-go. The security level is just not there. So don't think we can now XF Server Plus to that Microsoft Azure instance in the cloud. It ain't going to happen. So yes, we could go back and change the desktop. We're not. We're going to park the desktop now and say, you know, that was for local data. We'll worry about that later. In fact, we're looking at changing the file maintenance to do Harmony-based communication as opposed to file I/O, or as well as. So what we now need to do is focus on the client. From this point onwards, we're talking client. I'm not saying we're talking phone, we're talking client. We're going to target a phone later on. First thing you need to do though is create a client data object. Now, generally the client data object contains less logic, less cleverness than the server data objects we created. The reason it does is because we don't know what the client's going to be. So we sort of go for the common denominator. So the less we put in, the more clients we'll be able to support. Because we can't put WPF specific type coding in there because the client might not handle WPF. Okay? On an Android phone, we don't have WPF. We have Xamarin Forms and things like that, so we can still do raising events of notification of property change, so hopefully the Xamarin Forms will all still work. We also have no concept of a synergy record anymore. Okay? A synergy record, which a data object has. A data object has a synergy record property, as well as the understanding and concept of a synergy record. But remember what I said about 3 hours ago. We don't have a type in Synergy. Realistically, we don't have a type. We have a stream of bytes that we call a record area. Well, that just doesn't hang in other languages. Other languages want properties and types. So if we came along and said, oh, we've got this big blob called Synergy record, work it out, C#, for example, would go, I have no clue what you're talking about. I have no way to interpret this data. What are you trying to do? So to make sure we can hit all the clients we want to, then we remove this concept of a Synergy record. We still have the data associated with that Synergy record, but now we're exposing it as native types, strings, ints, date times maybe, things like that. And we only expose the individual properties, not something that combines them all together in a Synergy record. Nice thing about them is they're code generated. And nice thing is about them, as you would expect, they're extendable because they're partial classes, so we can extend them. We can extend them with client-specific properties. Now that doesn't mean client as in generic, which it can do, but it can also mean client as in specific. So you could add Android-specific capabilities into Android client data objects. You could implement iOS-specific capabilities into your iOS-specific client data objects. Ideally, best practice is to keep whatever you extend them with pretty generic. The client components are built into what we call a PCL, Portable Class Library. Portable Class Library is exactly what it says on the tin. It's a class library which is portable. Now remember the server data objects we created? The first thing I did was create a class library, code generate, add some code in, and it created the library, created a DLL. That's exactly what we're going to do here, but instead of a class library, it's a portable class library. And the only real difference is it's a cut down version. There's a whole chunk of things in class libraries that aren't available on all platforms. So we get rid of that chunk of stuff and we target various thinner platforms like Android and iOS. Then we can deploy onto them because Synergy will work on these iOS and these Android platforms. Now, one caveat is you must have the same namespace and assembly name, okay? Things can get a little bit confusing here, but hang with me and it makes sense. And that's because on the server, objects are resolved by the name, okay? We don't send an instance of an object because the way you handle an object in, for example, JavaScript or C# or VB is different potentially than the way we understand what an object is over here in Synergy land. Okay, so we need a way of being able to say An object called Fred over here is actually the same as object called Fred over here. We do that by name resolution. It's a common way of doing things. It's not like Ouija board stuff at all. So when we created the server, remember when I created the server project, I called the server project on vinyl data underscore server. That was the physical name of the project in the solution. I then changed the name of the assembly to on vinyl data, and I changed the name of the namespace to on vinyl data. So the assembly that gets created is called on vinyl data, but the project was on vinyl data underscore server. And I'm going to do exactly the same with the client. The client will be called on vinyl data underscore client, the project name inside the solution, but then I'll rename things and say, well, the assembly that you will create is on vinyl data. And the namespace will be on vinyl data. So over here on the client, when I say, can you please, Mr. Serverman over there, create me an instance of on vinyl data dot vinyl underscore details, that's the name that I'll pass over, on vinyl data dot vinyl underscore details. Here's the thin portable class library, and here's a full fat library, okay? But because the name of my data object is on vinyl data dot vinyl underscore details, is the same name as on vinyl data dot vinyl underscore details over here, I can resolve them. Okay, I know what you're talking about. Symphony Harmony will join the two together, okay? If this was called Fred, and over here it was called Wibble, we wouldn't have a clue. So it's name resolution. Okay, so let's create our client library. Remember, on vinyl data underscore server here. So I'm going to create a new library. New project, sorry. And this time, it's going to be Synergy DE, it's going to be Windows, but it's going to be a portable class library. Now, even though it's Windows, because it's portable, it will work on non-Windows machines, okay? I'm not going to create an Android-specific something. I'm not going to create an iOS-specific something. I'm going to create a Windows, but it will work on all platforms, or all platforms where portable class libraries are supported, okay? What should I call this? On vinyl data underscore client. I could call it anything because it's really just the name of the project in the solution. Okay? But the name of the project in the solution is then used to create the name of the DLL and all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to change that. Would it work if you had different DLL names? No. Because, and this is a caveat, and I don't know how to, and you could call it a bug, I'm calling it a feature, a caveat. One of the problems I've got is when I do resolution, as well as finding the actual class name, and you find the name of the class by namespace.class, and the method, for example, namespace class method. I also need to know where it is, okay? So I need to know what physical DLL, what library it's in. So one of the caveats is the library name has to be the same as the namespace. So if you've got namespace Wibble over here, your DLL over here has to be called Wibble with the namespace of Wibble in it. Again, name resolution. So if you then have pathed elements inside, I have a real problem because there's a bug in there that I don't work out the assembly name correctly, which is why I'm putting everything at top level. I'm not creating folders and all that kind of stuff. It's the name of the DLL has to be the same as the namespace. Okay, so what are we going to target? Well, I'm going to be able to target Android, and I want to be able to target iOS as well. The ultimate goal of today is to get this program running on this phone. That's the ultimate goal. If we get there, I am going to be very happy. If we don't, we will do in a few days when I'll send you all the projects and all that kind of stuff. What I will also do is add the iOS project in the next couple of weeks. The only reason I haven't thus far is because, as I mentioned in my session the other day, Android's brilliant. I can build the Android on this platform, on this Windows box, and I can deploy it to this phone via a USB cable. Life is good. To build iOS, I have to physically build on an Apple box, and I do not have an Apple Mac Mini here. Although we're only targeting Android today, we're going to physically target the library to iOS, and we'll have that project in. So you'll be able to see it if you use this project as a template moving forward. So what's the first thing we do when we create a new project? We delete the file. Now, what I now need to do is add a new file, and it's going to be a text file. And again, I'm just going to bring some files across from my little beastie, or sort of data, because guess what we're going to do? We're going to code generate something. We're going to code generate our client. Now the client is the same, it's a data, Symphony data, but this time I'm using a sort of different template, which is Bridge exposing CLR types. The underlying data will be exactly the same, and we'll look at the code. Same repository, same everything. So let's call this, well, given that that's server, we'll call this client, shall we? Okay. And we can drop down to our command prompt. I don't know why I've got two. Oh yes I do, because that was for my Synergy INI. And then I can do regem. So, code generated my client data object. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to add it into my project. And we can look at it, and it's got the same sort of names, it's got the same, remember, the same serializable Synergy record. So we've got this serialization point, so we're not serializing each individual field or property, we've just got this one serialization point. You know, some could argue that, well, I want to be able to look at the JSON and see all the individual properties. Then go for it, go and change the templates, because all it is templating. If you want to change the template on both the server and the client and JSON attribute each individual property, fill your boots. Go do it. It's not an issue. Would not break Symphony Bridge and Symphony Harmony. It would all still work. It would just go slower. That's the only reason we do it. But this time we're exposing barcode as a string, not as an alpha 20. Okay? So, we are going to add some references. So let's manage our NuGet packages. Browse. Let's look for Symphony. I could put the full fat framework on there. I don't want to put the full fat framework on there because I'm in PCL land. I could use Harmony Unplugged. Symphony Harmony Unplugged is the thinnest non-synergy required client to Symphony Harmony. So if you want to do those selects and executes and deletes and all that kind of stuff from a C# program without needing any synergy licenses on the client, then you can use Symphony Harmony Unplugged. Although I could use it, there's no point, because Symphony Harmony, which is a synergy implementation of Symphony Harmony, and I'm building a synergy client PCL, therefore I might as well use the Synergy Harmony. You know, there's no point trying to bypass synergy licensing just to have synergy licensing there already. And that's all Symphony Harmony Unplugged is there for. It's to bypass or not require synergy licensing on a client. And I can create C# data objects that talk through Harmony and all that kind of stuff. From this point onwards, I could write everything in C# and not require a single license anywhere, except on the server. Okay? Now, the licensing on the server is a slightly different model than what you would expect through XF Server Plus. Because conceptually, Symphony Bridge and XF Server Plus are the same thing, except Symphony Bridge is better. And I don't mean that in a negative way against XF Server Plus at all, not at all. The difference, the advantage of Symphony Bridge over XF Server Plus, and there's plenty of reasons why to use XF Server Plus. XF Server Plus works on Unix and VMS. My stuff doesn't. Okay? But what my stuff does is it allows you to get at data without having to write a single line of code. XF Server Plus, you have to write a method to return the data you want. So if you want data from 2 different files, you write 2 different methods. If you write data from 3 different files, you write 3 different methods. Assuming there's no logic, because we're not talking XF Server here, we're talking XF Server Plus. So if you've got a non-synergy client, because a non-synergy client can't use XF Server, it's got to be a synergy client. So if you've got a non-synergy client that you want to get data out of synergy, you'll use XF Server Plus, but you'll have to write a method. With Symphony Bridge, if you're on Windows, you don't have to write a method. You can issue a select command as long as you've code generated the data objects. Doesn't matter what language the client is in. Synergy, VB, C#, Java, doesn't matter. So that's the advantage of Bridge over XF Server Plus. That doesn't mean Bridge replaces XF Server Plus, far from it. What Bridge can do is use XF Server Plus to get to your Unix and your VMS logic, if you so desire. Okay? You can daisy chain so you can have a JavaScript calling through Symphony Harmony to Symphony Bridge on a Windows machine that then uses XF Server Plus to get at your data and your logic on VMS. There's no reason why you couldn't do that whole topology. We're going to use Symphony Harmony and I'm going to install it. Thank you very much. Yes, I accept. Okay, does it build? Okay, it has built, but it's built things wrong. Because, I don't want to be on C, I'm doing it on F, aren't I? If we're looking on vinyl client, bin, debug, oh dear, I've got on vinyl data underscore client. That's not what I want. I don't want the DLL underscore client. So what I need to do is go back to here and change some properties. So I need to, as the slide showed, change the assembly name and the default namespace. Okay, rebuild that. And hopefully this time, build succeeded, I get on vinyl data. So yes, the client and the server libraries are identically named. So you have to be careful of where you take them out, etc. But if you're referencing the projects, you should be okay. But now the client and the server DLLs are the same, the namespaces are the same, the data objects are named the same. My client will talk to my server and my server will communicate with my client. There's no demos for quite a while now because we're just building and layering up the client technology, the technology stack that I went through with Physio My Way. This is exactly how we built Physio My Way, exactly how we built that.